Welcome to Unpacked, the podcast that examines how technology is reshaping business and our world, with this season unpacking the topic of generative AI. This show is produced by Think Tank at Lab 45, which is Wipro's innovation lab. My name's Stuart Black, and I'm joined as ever by the voice of the show, Think Tank's innovation lead, Arvind Ravishankar. Arvind, how are you? Where are you today?
Hey, Stuart. Great question. I am in India. I'm on travel.
Work or pleasure, or a bit of both?
Mostly work, actually. Doing a tour of our Bangalore offices, doing a bunch of client workshops, getting ready for our year ahead. So it promises to be an exciting year at Think Tank, and so much going on in generative AI. So lots to talk about, lots to do.
Good stuff. Every time I talk to you, you seem to be in an interesting place or coming back from an interesting place. Australia, Costa Rica, India. I'm still stuck here in London, but it's nice that one of us gets to see the world.
Well, I will plan to stop in London next time.
You're welcome anytime. In a few moments, we're going to have Arvind's deep dive interview with Dr. Rachel Adams, who's the principal researcher at ICT Africa. Arvind, can you tee this one up for us a little bit?
Sure. Stuart, we've covered so many interesting topics in our podcast in the area of generative AI. We've unpacked technology, we've unpacked business, we've even unpacked sustainability. And today we are opening up a new topic. We are going to unpack responsible AI. What is responsible AI? And Dr. Rachel Adams is an expert in this topic, and I'm absolutely looking forward to this episode.
Fantastic. Well, before we get to that, we've got a couple of AI stories that have been in the press recently that we can dig into. Our first story today is one that asks whether businesses need a chief AI officer. The article suggests that this executive role is rapidly emerging as a must-have for organizations that lean towards using or adopting AI technologies. Research shows that 98% of IT executives support the development of this role to accelerate the adoption of generative AI. This Chief AI Officer, or CAIO as it would be called, would typically oversee AI governance, resource allocation, security, compliance, legal, risk management, the whole gambit, to ensure that there's good strategy and also that ethical and legal practices are followed. So Arvind, what value do you think a Chief AI Officer could bring to an organization that existing roles like CIO or CDO might not provide?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, Stuart. I don't think the role of a CDO or CIO or CTO, I don't think it becomes any less relevant, and I don't think those roles, can't address the new needs of AI. I think they can. But having said that, what's interesting about AI is that it's being positioned as a general purpose technology, and general purpose technologies normally land up influencing all areas of the business, whether it's marketing, HR, finance, legal, product development, R&D, and in a lot of businesses may even reshape the business model itself. And so having someone who understands AI in a broader sense and can cover all these different areas of regulations and technology and business, I think would help a lot, right? The question is, are those profiles available? Are people available with those skill sets? I think it's going to be very hard to find people with all those different skill sets. So in some ways, maybe it's better to work with your CIOs or CTOs to make them the CAIOs rather than trying to find someone new. Not sure, right? Could pan out any different way. But I think having that role overall could help. It's a general purpose technology. It's going to affect all areas of business.
Absolutely. I mean, is there a solution to upskilling enough people to take on that role? And also, how critical do you think that role is going to be in a company's future? Is it just going to be an advisory position, or do you think it's going to become front and center?
No, I think it'll be front and center. It will not be an advisory position because I do believe 10 years from now, in the last decade, companies have gone from becoming software companies to becoming data companies to becoming cloud companies And I think now they're going to become AI companies where AI will be front and center in everything that is done within the organization. And so I do think it'll be a central role. I don't think it'll be a side role. And in order to find people within these skill sets, I think Stuart, it's just like, the role of the CTO has evolved over time, right? And CTOs have evolved their skill sets, their understanding of technology, they're more nuanced. And so, similar to that, I think the role of CIO will evolve over time. It is going to be hard to find those people initially, but in a couple of years, you're going to have a lot more people in those roles. You're going to have a lot more people in those roles. And I'm going to tend to believe that the initial profiles that will fit those roles are people who have been working on AI on the technology side for the last 5 to 10 years, right? Those are the people who naturally will progress into those roles. That's my belief.
Interesting. Watch this space then, I guess. Our second story then is about something maybe we can all relate to, the stress that you feel when your email inbox is overflowing. And the article looks at how AI can help with that. The article cites a study from Canada about AI tools successfully reducing anxiety by prioritizing emails for you, minimizing interruptions, and summarizing content. This, along with best practices at a team level, can make email management more efficient and less overwhelming. Sounds too good to be true. Arvind, would you trust AI to tell you which messages are more important than others?
I think I may trust AI to filter out messages that that may not be relevant for me, but I don't know if I can trust AI to tell me which is an important message. I'm not sure yet. What's interesting about email, Stuart, is that in email you don't have any tone of voice, right? When you and I are talking, you can sense tone of voice. And so if there's an email that comes in where it's urgent or it's important, or that a customer's irate, will AI be able to pick those things up based on the language? I'm not sure. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. But I'm definitely looking forward to AI filtering out the thousands of spam that I get today, right? It's crazy. You won't believe it. I am constantly going into my email and resetting my spam filters. And no matter what I do, every time I open up my email every day, I at least have 40 emails that are unnecessary. And if AI can clear all that up, why not, right? I want to read the emails that matter to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all get on board with that. That sounds like a good use of that tool. Are there other areas of our typical domestic daily admin that you think AI is well positioned to help with?
Oh, and pretty much a lot of the tasks we do, right? I definitely see AI being your exec admin, these AI co-pilots. I believe you're going to depend on them to manage your day, your schedule, your productivity, your emails, your meetings, your contacts. 100%. It's going to, a couple of years, it's going to be your co-pilot in how you run your everyday life. And I think people are working towards it already.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when they can help my son eat his vegetables. That's what I'm waiting for.
I think you would be a billionaire if you figure that out.
Okay, we'll work on it. And we're about to have your interview with Dr. Rachel Adams. Can you just explain a little bit more about what we're going to hear here?
Absolutely. Stuart, businesses are going to move away from piloting AI projects to very soon producing or going into production with these AI programs. They're going to be launching these products into market. They're going to be available to mainstream customers, and people are going to be driving revenue. And so while these products start driving revenue and productivity for companies, they also still have a lot of challenges, right? Biases, hallucinations, safety, security. So the technology is not ready yet to be deployed without some form of understanding of how it could impact society as a whole. And so this topic, responsible AI, is what I'm going to cover with Dr. Rachel Adams. And given her background in AI policy and the center she runs, I think she's going to have some really interesting insights on what businesses should do to prepare for this. The other interesting thing is regulations in this space is just starting to evolve. It's just starting to hit us. And if you notice the new European Union's AI policy is the first of its kind that's coming out, and we know that a lot more are going to follow. And so, hearing her take on what the policy is and how it's going to impact business, I think these are all very important topics for business leaders to have a sense for. So, I'm interested to unpack this with her.
Well, let's get into it then. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting one. Here for everyone then is Arvind's interview with Dr. Rachel Adams. Our think tank focuses on researching emerging technologies that will shape your future. From generative AI to exoskeletons, we study the impact these technologies will have on business, humanity, and our planet. And through our podcast, newsletters, and social media content, we have a direct line to a truly global emerging technology community. So if you'd like to find out more about the impact these technologies will have on your business, then reach out to our team at lab45thinktank.com.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Unpacked. Today we're going to cover a really important topic, responsibility, right? So if you look at the word responsibility and the origin of that word and you break it down, what it says is it's your ability to respond in certain situations and certain conditions, right? And today, the situation we are in is that we have uncovered a new technology, a technology that could possibly have profound implications for our business, for our society, for the earth that we live in. And as we deploy and as we develop that technology, we have a sense of responsibility towards our consumers, our businesses, and our future. So today I'm going to bring on an expert and we are going to talk about responsible AI. And how can you as a business leader be aware of the regulations, the ethics, and your actions that would dictate the future of this particular area, right, that we focused on. So I want to bring on a special guest. She is the principal investigator for the Global Index of Responsible AI. She is also a future author of the book, A New Empire of AI and the Future of Global Inequality. It's a book that is in the publishers today. It's completed and it is going to be out in November of this year. She's also published widely on the topic of AI policy, and she has a PhD and her master's in international law from the University of Cape Town, right? And with all these credentials, her career now is culminating nicely where she is the CEO at the Global Center on Artificial Intelligence, specifically for governance, right? On AI governance. So I'm really excited to bring on Dr. Rachel Adams into our show today. And so we're so happy to have her on our show. Dr. Rachel Adams, welcome. You are the CEO of a large organization here and an expert in this area of responsible AI. It's such an inspiration. Super happy to have you here.
Thank you, Arvind. I'm very, very glad to be with you today and looking forward to our conversation on such an important topic.
Love it. Love it. So, Dr. Adams, let's start off with, you know, the word responsible AI is being thrown around a lot. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people publish on it. It's there in the press everywhere. So maybe for our audience here, let's start with dissecting. What is that, right? What is responsible AI?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm not sure that we have found an answer or a definition to responsible AI that we all agree on. Different people call it different things. It's kind of sometimes referred to as ethical AI or trustworthy AI. If you're in the UK, your government might be talking about AI safety. But I think it's this recognition that AI holds the power to do good in the world or to do bad in the world, and that we have to use it with care. We have to think about what impacts it might have on our human societies, what impacts it might have on future generations, what impacts it might have on our democracies or on the environment. And we can talk in much more detail about how we break down this concept of responsible AI, but in my kind of thinking about it, it's how we think with care about the impact it will have on the world and how we recognize the agency we as individuals or AI developers or businesses have to make sure it is used to have a positive impact, and we take care to ensure it doesn't have a negative impact, because it has been shown to have negative, harmful impacts around the world.
Got it. Wow, I love that. I love those three words. Think with care. That is beautiful. There have been many technologies that have come out. We had recently, in the last 20 years, we've had the internet, we've had mobile phones, we've had cloud, we've had big data, um, we've had platforms. Many technologies have, we've had, autonomous cars. There's many, many technologies that have been coming out. Now, but AI seems to have a special attention when it comes to responsibility. It's very polarizing. Could you talk about, is this technology in the area of responsibility? Is this technology any different from others that have come out? Why is there so much talk about responsible AI? I don't remember there being a talk about responsible internet as much as AI today.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are similarities with some of the technologies that you have named, but AI is, for policymakers, we call it a wicked policy problem. So it's something that can bring about huge potential for good, but carries huge risks as well. And it doesn't fit within one particular segment or ministry or department. It's a cross-cutting thing. So that makes it kind of difficult to manage. But I think there's kind of three main things around artificial intelligence that make it different or require a different kind of approach than earlier technologies. One is that it's growing at an exponential rate. It's able to self-learn and self-improve, which means it's getting ahead of us. The second thing that is related to that is that it has degrees of it's autonomous to certain respects. And so it's able to make decisions and behave in ways that are outside of how we can control it. And then third, also related, is that it works in ways that we cannot completely know, define, or understand, particularly neural networks that work at a kind of huge scale, that it's almost impossible to determine how it arrived at a particular decision. So because of some of these things, it seems slightly out of grasp. It makes us as humans that want to control everything within the Anthropocene, it makes us anxious. So I think that's why, compared to earlier technologies, it's being treated as something different, something scary, something we need to think carefully about.
This is super insightful. As you were talking about those three things, what I realized was that the exponentiality part, even that, we've had other technologies that have had exponential growth and companies that have had exponential growth. But the other two parts that you brought out have such a distinct difference where autonomy, for example, giving autonomy to something else apart from humans, it's the first time we're doing that, right? Even with cars, we're so hesitant to give autonomous driving to cars, but allowing something that is a general purpose technology and giving it autonomy in all aspects of our life, clearly I can understand why we have to be careful about that. So I think that's a great point. And the second one is, you're right. We don't fully understand how the technology works today, right? And I think those are two things that we have not faced before us. I think we have a pretty decent understanding of the internet or cloud or any of the other technologies, and none of those technologies will have the autonomy that AI would have. So let's dive a little bit into that, right? Let's talk about autonomy. Today, as you look at policy and policy making, how are you thinking about autonomy? Are there certain decisions that AI should not be making for humans? Are there certain decisions AI should is okay for them to make? How do you even start to think about policy when it comes to that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of a lot of progress in this space. So one of the kind of key criteria for thinking about when do we want machines to be able to function autonomously or not be able to function autonomously is where they may be making a decision that's going to have a significant impact on somebody's life. So if they're making a decision about whether someone has access to a social grant or to a home loan, these are really, really significant decisions. And there should be some kind of human oversight to make sure that all the different contextual factors are taken into account and bias in particular is not occurring as it so often can. So it's really about, is it going to have is this decision that it's making going to impact a human life in a fairly significant way? And in those respects, I don't think AI should be able to function. So autonomous weapons is the kind of most extreme example of this. Are we allowing weapons to make a decision about which humans get to live and which don't? That is completely unethical. But if it's a decision that's not related to a human, that's related to a kind of efficiency gain within some kind of processing system that may kind of impact humans later down the line or indirectly, but not in a way that might be material for them, it may not matter so much. So this is why I think very often in this space, we want to make it really abstract, these definitions of what responsible AI is and isn't. But I think the examples I'm trying to demonstrate is that we have to look at how an AI is being used within a particular set of circumstances and contexts in order to know whether or not it is being used responsibly.
And what about the second part, Dr. Adams, our understanding of AI? Uh, Today we are, it is being deployed. It's out there. People are using artificial intelligence, and we have a theoretical understanding of it. It's not like experts don't understand it, but it's a theoretical understanding, right? Because of the complexity of what happens in the back end, we really truly do not know where the understanding comes from within
Mm.
AI. And I don't know how we would also figure that out as we go along. But how do we deal with that second issue or the third issue, the understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of parts to this. So one is, why is having an understanding of how something works when it affects our lives important? It's usually important when something goes wrong and somebody is harmed or hurt or a human right they hold is violated. Then, if we cannot say why something has happened, that person may not be able to seek justice for a wrong that's occurred. But understanding is a complex thing. And I think within this kind of very complex world in which we're using these complex technologies, the people that are using them and have the power to deploy them or not, that's why they bear this much higher level of responsibility, because people that might be affected by the use of this technology do not necessarily either know it's being used or know or understand how it is used. So I think there's also like, how do you think about the responsibility that businesses or governments or whoever is in those positions of power to decide when an AI is being used or not? How do they take responsibility for the fact that there's this asymmetry of knowledge and this therefore asymmetry of power between those that know about its use and those that don't?
Yeah, I think, this dovetails nicely into this next topic, which is how do business leaders handle this, right? Is there a way for them to think about responsible AI? And I want to go back to what you said about thinking with care, right?
Mm.
So I'm going to frame the question around that. That's such a lovely, lovely three words. So for business leaders, clearly they are in the forefront of determining the future of this technology. In fact, maybe even in the forefront of how policy is created. So in order for them to think with care, let's break it down, if it's okay with you, into two parts. The development of artificial intelligence and the deployment of artificial intelligence. So, in the area of development of AI, there are business leaders across the world today developing foundation models, developing products and services for consumers, developing new use cases, healthcare, banking. In fact, a lot of banking customers are thinking about how do you deploy AI to look at these loan generation as activities, right? And to your point, get determining if someone should own a home or not should have human oversight, shouldn't be
Mm.
purely a decision by technology. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's start with development of artificial intelligence. What are some things that business leaders should be considering? How should they be thinking with care?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think thinking with care means getting as many people thinking as possible. So creating kind of diverse groups of people that are thinking with care allows that thinking to be bigger. Then I think if you're developing technology, I'm based here in Cape Town in South Africa. My work has really been focused across the African continent. And the main kind of point of tension I see is between those groups that are developing the technologies and the technologies that are actually needed here on the continent. And I think Africa is a really interesting case because if AI holds so much power and potential to transform lives for the better, then in some respects, Africa has the most to gain, but also potentially the most to lose if these technologies are not developed in a way that suits the needs of the continent. So for me, if I was thinking about people that are developing these technologies, I would say develop the technologies that are needed for the people, not develop the technologies that are needed for a business to grow. Because I think that's where the big gap is. So that would be how do you do that? I mean, I'm not a developer myself, but I think some of the things would be around kind of user testing, community testing, engaging with communities, engaging with people, and thinking much more widely about who the end user or who might be the affected groups of a particular technology might be. So I'll give a more concrete example. I know in your series you've been really looking at LLMs and generative AI. LLMs have been designed and developed largely for English speaking people, which means that the non English speaking world is effectively being left behind from the benefits this new technology can bring. So, if OpenAI and the groups that are developing these technologies were more attuned to what are the language needs of different kinds of groups, then we could start thinking about how this gap could close. And then the people that are deploying the technology, I would be thinking about who is affected by this, who is affected positively, who is affected negatively, and what are the systems and the kind of research processes that you have in place to find that out. You spoke in the beginning about the definition of responsible. Part of that is being responsive. Both developers and deployers of AI need to be responsive to the negative impacts that AI is having on the ground, which means finding out really what those impacts are and then responding to those impacts with care, or ideally making sure the negative impacts don't happen. So I don't think we're thinking down the line enough about who is really impacted by this technology, not necessarily just in the first order, but what are the kind of broader social impacts of some of these technologies? What are the broader environmental impacts of some of these technologies? We need to kind of broaden our thinking so that thinking with care is more than just me in this moment, but us in this world together.
Could you also talk a little bit, Dr. Adams, about, the one aspect of deploying AI is about the impact it could have on people once it comes out, and is it serving the need? And I think that's a really good distinction. But there's also the second aspect of while you're deploying it, there are these questions on, it's being trained on a lot of intellectual property on the internet, and how do we account for that? the fact that it's learned from the internet, the fact that it's learned from a lot of people's knowledge on the internet. Are there thoughts on how we're going to regulate that, or are there policies coming out on that particular area?
Yes, I mean, this is not the kind of IP issues and not my core area of expertise, but I have colleagues that are really, really thinking carefully about some of these issues. From my perspective, what I've been more concerned about is whose knowledge and experiences of the world are not reflected on the internet and therefore
Mm.
not being reflected in these AI models. And so, again, these AI models are not serving them and are leaving them behind.
So there could be inherent biases because a whole set of people are left out. And I think this goes back, in technical words, it goes back to the training of the
Mm.
models. There's human reinforcement training and the data used for training. If both of those don't represent broader societies, then you will have biases within the model. I think that's a really good call out. Um, so apart from the framework of impact it could have, the framework on needs, and the framework on IP, are there other things that business leaders have to be considering during the development and deployment of AI when it comes to policy?
Yes, I mean, I think business leaders are not government, so they don't need to, governments need to be thinking about how do we create enabling environments that allow people and businesses to use and develop these models and these technologies in ways that do good for our societies. But I think business leaders don't necessarily have to kind of have that bigger, broader thinking in mind. And I think they need to be thinking very much about the kind of human rights based issues that could occur from the use and deployment, the development, use, and deployment of the technologies that they create and use. So bias is obviously a very, very, very important one. Um, and then I think privacy is the one that really comes up for me when it comes to businesses. So even if we think about that point that was just raised about who's not represented in data or the data that models are trained on, well, we fill that by collecting data on those people. But are we doing that in ways that are responsible, that protect and give dignity to the rights of these people, particularly the right to privacy? And I think businesses, there's so much value in the data they hold. So really getting clear about what are our responsibilities in terms of protecting the privacy of the data that we hold about people? How are we sharing that? How are we ensuring that the people we hold data about know where their data is at any given point? I think the fundamentals of data protection law and privacy are essential for businesses.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. The when you were developing the index for responsible AI, are these some of the factors that are in consideration, or even with this global center of AI governance, bias, privacy, data protection, are these the factors that are being considered as you're developing policy and regulations?
Yes, very, very, very much so. So, the Global Index on Responsible AI, which we are announcing the results of the first edition later this month in May. So, we're at a really, really exciting stage with that project. But it's a really kind of critical project because it breaks down the concept of responsible AI into 29 measurable indicators. I'm
Oh,
probably
wow.
not good. I'm probably not going to
Wow.
remember all 29 off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I will give you the three dimensions in which they're broken up into. So the first one
Uh-huh.
is on AI governance. So responsible AI governance. So that's looking from anything between like public procurement laws to are there mechanisms for redress and remedy if rights are violated? Are the transparency laws around how AI is used? Are there principles like do no harm and proportionality? Is there legal frameworks that mandate accountability in the use of AI? Do governments have national policies in place? Are they prescribing impact assessments for the use of AI? Those are some of the topics that we measure in that first dimension. And then the second dimension is on AI and human rights, and it's split up in two subdimensions, one on civil and political rights. So that's where states have a responsibility to ensure that they do not refrain from interfering with these rights. So it's the right to privacy, it's freedom of expression, it's access to information, and a couple of other rights groupings. And then there are socioeconomic rights, so like the right to health, the right to education. And these, we're assessing, our government's thinking about how AI could be used to advance the right to education. We've also got a massive focus on gender equality and women's empowerment. And then the third dimension is looking at responsible AI capacity. So what capacities exist within states to respond, we go back to that idea of responding to emerging issues, knowing that this technology changes, it is not static, it is not monolithic. We need to know that governments and states have the capacity to respond to new challenges as they arise. So that's what the third dimension is measuring.
No, it's amazing. Wow, 29 different indicators in 3 dimensions. I mean, when, Mustafa Suleiman calls this a general purpose technology that will proliferate widely in every area of human life. And what you're saying reflects that completely. It reflects that completely. So if business leaders are in the forefront of some of this, Dr. Adams, and I think the comprehensive nature of what's being developed in policy, all of it may not be relevant for them, right? And it'll take a lot of time. And CEOs are really busy people. How would you recommend? Like, let's dive into what they should practically do. How do they stay updated on this? How do they know what decisions to make? How do they get educated? Should they have people within their organizations, chief responsibility officers? Could you talk a little bit about that? What are some ideas you have? How can they help?
So, beyond listening to your podcast, which I think is one of the key things, no, but I think that staying educated in this space is a really hard thing to do because there is a lot of noise. It's become an area where there's a lot of things being said, there's a lot of hype. It's quite difficult to understand, what's really possible. Where is the evidence of positive impact and where is there just a lot of noise that this is going to transform things? So I think that kind of question of like, how do you stay educated and how do you stay on top of this very complex moving space is not a simple question. I do think that we're going to get to a stage where chief ethics officers become a really, really important role. I think we've got to recognize that the kind of governance and regulation around AI is not settled. It's going to move and shift and change a lot over the coming years. The EU has just released the AI Act, which is the first kind of major piece of regulation on AI. My strong sense is that AI is going to be regulated, so there's going to be kind of laws at a sectoral level. So I've been thinking quite a lot about in the financial services sector, how new laws may kind of come in to shape how AI technologies are used in the financial services space to ensure this kind of integrity and fairness in financial services provision and so forth. Equally, I think some of the issues around how AI could be used in the health space is very specific to health. And so I don't think the kind of regulation of AI in healthcare is going to look exactly the same as the use of AI in financial services or in education. So that's why my kind of sense on this is that as we understand more and more how AI is impacting our societies, when we have more and more evidence of what kind of governance and policy tools are most effective, then we're going to move towards a kind of regulation and policy that sits at a more sectoral level.
That makes sense. So would you say that the European AI Act that you brought up would you say that they are sort of pioneering the space of regulations? Is that a fair assessment? Is that a good starting point for people to understand what the regulations could be?
Yes, I think that is a very, very good starting point. And I think we saw with the General Data Protection Regulation how the EU kind of pioneered and led that space. I would say that the EU's approach, while it is rigorous, it may not be applicable to everybody everywhere. So I'm working with the African Union Commission at the moment to develop their continental strategy on AI. And while there's some things like a kind of risk-based approach to the use of AI and understanding, which technologies are higher risk, which may require outright kind of banning, which is what the EU AI Act speaks to. There's also a lot of things that are really specific to the African continent. And I think this is going to be the same across this space, is that we need to think about what regulation and what kind of governance is most appropriate for different kinds of regions of the world, different kinds of sectors, and different kinds of businesses. And unfortunately, it's going to probably take us longer to work that out than it is to develop a whole new set of technologies. They're going to change things entirely.
It is. And actually, this goes to your point on exponential growth. We are seeing AI growing much faster than any other technology. In fact, even within our podcast, the think tank that we run at Lab 45, it's hard for us, even though we are in the field studying it every day, it's hard for us to keep up with the innovation that's happening as one human being or one organization. That's how fast innovation is happening in this space. So then what I'm hearing is, and I'm going to brainstorm with you a little bit so that our business leaders and our audiences can take away some ways in which they can help and also be responsible. Number one, if you're a larger organization with resources, sounds like you need to have a dedicated role, like a chief
Mm.
ethics officer, right? Who's overseeing all of your AI development, your AI deployment, and knows all these regulations, policies, and everything you spoke about, bias, privacy, data security needs. Somebody who has that overarching view within your organization. That could be a possible way in which you could approach it. And for a company that has less resources, doesn't have the ability to invest all that time and money in a group or an organization, they could start with reading up the EU Act and then think about how it could apply. Like you said, most importantly, it's going to change based on your domain of business, whether you're in healthcare, banking, or it could also change based on the region you're in. Are you in Africa? Are you in India? Are you in US? Apart from these two things, Dr. Adams, if we could brainstorm a little bit, is there anything else they could do to stay updated on this? Do you know, are there any other policies, acts in America, India, other countries that you're starting to see emerge as things we should be aware of?
Yes, there's probably more happening than I could begin to speak about, but I would say keep an eye on the data that's coming out of the Global Index on Responsible AI because it's the
Mm,
most globally diverse data set on what is happening in terms of responsible AI around the world. And we're seeing really, really, really kind of interesting, different policy responses coming out of all corners of the world. So I think that's really exciting. So our website will be www.globalcentre.ai, and there'll certainly be lots of information that some of your listeners can look up on that website. I think there is a lot a lot of information about different kind of AI topics and fields, whatever anybody might be working with online. And I actually think part of what we're facing is a bit of burnout in this space. Like even somebody like me, it's my sole kind of focus. It's like we're inundated. So I think finding ways to remember what it is to be human, not to feel we need to automate all our business systems, and actually some of the human systems may be more agile and less brittle, and maybe doing things really well. Don't fix it if it's not broken. So I think not feeling pressure to adopt AI everywhere without really thinking about, is this going to add value? Is this what we need? Is also an important mindset to have.
Amazing. Amazing. I love it. I think going back to thinking with care, right? Thinking with care, that's super important. I want to pick one particular topic, Dr. Adams, and what I would love for you to do is tell our audience how a policy around it is even developed, right? I think it'll be amazing for people to know because tomorrow then it'll give them a sense for when they make their decisions, what should they be aware of, right? So let us take, for example, bias or privacy, right? Any of these topics. If you can pick one topic, could you tell us how a policy around that topic is developed? What are sort of the ways in which, what are sort of considerations, and how is the community involved in a policy like that being developed?
Sure. So if it is a state and government policy, there should be some kind of expert consultation and then open consultation. So in some of the policy processes that I've worked on, there'll be a government department that says, okay, we realize that something needs to happen. This is an important area for us. It's important strategically. It's important for the growth of our country. It's important for us. So we're going to think about developing some kind of policy response to it. So we're going to start off by establishing a kind of expert working group, usually of a kind of selection of different stakeholders. So you will have business representatives, you'll have academics, you'll have civil society groups that might be championing communities, and then you'll have technologists and your kind of policymaker type people coming together to think about what are the opportunities, what are the risks, how do we balance the two? And often that will be looking at similar jurisdictions and saying, okay, what is happening here? Is that relevant for us? Have they maybe got similar kind of social demographics? Might they have a similar economic context to us? And that's also why I think the Global Index is such a useful and important tool, because very often here on the African continent, we're kind of constantly given Europe as an example of good policy, and now there's going to be a wealth of information about different policy approaches to AI across the global south or the majority world and across the continent itself. And then you should kind of come to some kind of draft, which you will have public consultations around, where people will input. You might ask for public submissions. And I think one of the interesting things is how AI can kind of help in that process. So say you kind of release a draft policy on AI and you say, okay, anybody within the country can make a submission about what they think needs to change or what they like or whatever they want to say about it. And as a department, you receive 100,000 submissions, then you could think about using a kind of LLM type tool to synthesize these submissions and say, okay, a lot of people are saying we need to change this. A lot of people are saying they like that. A lot of people are saying you've missed that. So I think there's also interesting ways in which AI can really help in those kinds of processes.
I love it. What we've covered many different areas today in our conversation. Is there anything we missed, Dr. Adams, that you want the world to know, right? Our audiences, our business leaders, but we also have engineers, we have scientists, we have government leaders listening to our podcast. What do you want the world to know? What do you want all of us to know about responsible AI? Did we miss anything in our conversation?
I think the biggest thing I would say is that we need to be working together. And it sounds such a kind of trite and obvious thing to say, but the more I work with people developing the technology and trying to develop the technology for good, or the more I work with people that may be affected, the more I can understand what policy and governance needs to do. So I think the more technologists work with policymakers or communities, or the more policymakers work with technologists and communities, the more we can all understand how to navigate this together. So I think that would be my final kind of plea.
I love it. I love it. In fact, now I got to make a plug for Wipro because I'm really proud of the fact that Wipro has a responsible AI team. We have a chief policy officer who's looking at AI every day, the regulations in the space. And to your point, she also participates, right? She's a chairman, she's a part of many advisory councils in the United States on this particular area. And I think we will bring her on board into our podcast next to talk about what Wipro is doing. So I hope our audiences stay tuned to that. But Dr. Adams, this has been amazing. I think you've given us so many things to think about, and you have really broken it down to the fundamentals, the basics that we all need to be considering in this particular area. So I want to thank you for that, and most probably we will bring you back on in 6 months to see how this space has evolved, right? And I would love to hear more about how the Global Center of AI Governance is progressing and the impact it's having on the world. So definitely, I think we will do another episode with you. I think I want to conclude with two things you brought out, which I thought was so significant. The first one is that unlike other technologies, artificial intelligence is going to make decisions for humans in the future. It is going to do it, right? It's where it's progressing. And so, as we, as business leaders and governments and citizens, as we work on this technology for future generations, thinking with care, like you said, and understanding that it's going to be making decisions for humans to some degree, right? Well, initially it will be with human oversight, but as time progresses, there are going to be some decisions it's going to make on its own. So thinking with care, I think, is a lovely way to frame it. And I hope everybody thinks with care as they develop this technology. So thank you, Dr. Adams. Truly appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Arvin, great interview as always. Can you break down some of the key points that you thought were important in this one?
Yep. So I'm going to start with the three words that stood out to me in this session, Stuart. Think with care. We spoke a lot about what it means to have responsible AI. And I think at the end of the day, the way Dr. Rachel summarized it, as long as you think with care, as long as you deploy with care, a lot of what you do will end up being right, right? And so I kind of want to reiterate that. I think that summarizes responsible AI really well. Um, Along with that, she had some really interesting insights on what makes AI different from other technologies, right? We didn't have responsible cloud or we didn't have responsible IoT, but this topic of responsible AI has come up. And why is AI any different from the other technologies? And why is this sense of responsibility important? And she summarized it in three ways, which I loved, right? The first is that for the first time, we have technology which could land up making decisions for us as humans. So far, technology has been a tool, and we have been making the decisions, and technology has been implementing it. But for the first time, we are facing a new form of technology where the technology is going to make the decisions for us at some point, right? It's going to have a sense of autonomy over human life. And so, as people give that autonomy to AI, we need to be responsible for how we do it. So, that's the first major difference between AI and other technologies. The second one is that today, AI still doesn't fully understand what it's doing, right? It hasn't developed a sense of ethics. It hasn't developed a sense of understanding of the human world. And so while it makes that decisions, it's actually making it without understanding the consequences. When you and I make decisions, we are accountable for understanding the consequences. But AI does not have to do that. And so again, the responsibility falls on us to make sure that we deploy this technology correctly. And the third reason why AI is different is the exponential scale at which it's growing, right? Even last 10 years, technologies have been growing in exponential scales, but AI has far surpassed everything, right? If you look at ChatGPT's growth within the first 1 month, it beat every other technology ever developed by a human being. So exponentiality,
Mm.
autonomy, and the fact that it still doesn't fully understand the decisions and things it's doing creates a situation where responsible AI becomes extremely important. And the practical wisdom that she shared with us was her organization is tracking 29 different measures for what it means to be responsible in AI. So if businesses are interested in understanding if they are being responsible in deploying I highly recommend reading the Global Index, where they track 29 measures in this organization. And I also recommend reading the EU Act. These are the two things that she spoke about as tools and resources for our business leaders. So I highly recommend business leaders to pay attention to this. The last thing that she spoke about, which is really interesting to me, was in organizations that have the resources, she spoke about a chief responsibility officer. Sort of similar to that news article we just spoke about, right? The
Right.
CAIO. But she actually wants to carve out a specific role within an organization to deploy AI responsibility, a chief responsibility officer. And I thought that's super smart. I think organizations should consider it. In fact, Wipro has a chief policy officer when it comes to AI, and she participates in all the leading forums, organizations, policy development across the world, EU, America, India, etc. And so I think other organizations should be doing the same. So a lot of great insights from Dr. Rachel Adams, and we're going to have two more episodes, Stuart, where we cover responsible AI. And I think a lot more is going to come and open up on this particular topic, but a fantastic start.
Well, plenty to chew on there, and yes, with two more to come, I'm sure we'll drill into this in a bit more depth. But great stuff. Thank you so much, Arvind. And that's it for today. It just leaves me to say to Arvind, we appreciate all your hard work with the interviewees and drawing out so much interesting information.
Of course, it's so much fun to talk to these folks. The range of wisdom and the variety of wisdom is always amazing. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Stuart.
Good
And thank
stuff.
you for being here with us.
Well, always a pleasure for myself as well. So let me just say to everybody, if you like our podcast, please like, subscribe, or tell your friends. I'm Stuart Black, and we'll see you next time on Unpacked.